is stronger than the uses in science, so now we have to precise it. Well, we will talk about Facebook networks, but not only. And these are the main ideas why we consider it's an important level of social life that is in between individuals and global society, and also in other disciplines, not only with people, but also of materials, of animals, of, as you will see, as connections between things and so on. It is an articulation of multi-level systems with the idea that it is a part of the relevant elements. It does not exclude institutions. It does not include organizations or individuals. Just it is another level that connects everything. But the first interest is in relationships, rather in entities, status, and so on. So what was our question in this residence? There was a main one: what are the effects of time, age, life events, and life transitions on personal networks? You can also already see that all these kind of dimension, time, age, life events are different, and we felt during this session that we have to consider them together and separated. Well, the problem is that in social science there are works about these questions of effects of life events on networks, but they are very segmented. For example, people study having their first child, or becoming retired, or moving abroad, but they work on only one kind of event, while in life they are interconnected and they come the ones with the others. It's sometimes difficult to disentangle them, and we want to gather the knowledge about the different life events. First, for people to have an overview of these effects, but also to compare these events and trying to understand why such event has such kind of effect, for example, on size of network, while other kinds of events have effect on structure of the network or turnover of people in the network and so on. And this is for social science. And in data science in general, research approaches very sharply, in a very precise way, the effects of time and of events, but it is difficult to connect with human social life and to interpret these results in terms of human behavior. That's why we decided to connect these three disciplines. So our common questions become now: how are relational dynamics and biographical transitions tied? How are the processes constructed precisely, because time remained really at the core of our question? And what can we know better about network dynamics and about life events, and how one question improves the other? And also about methods, because going with these questions and going in several disciplines raises questions of methods, and questions of method can help also to understand conceptual questions. So these are our common questions, both of the disciplines, social disciplines and hard science disciplines, hard in some way, at least a part of these questions. And we can see they are at very different scales, more global or more local. And we always have to switch from a level to another one, or it is valuable to switch. It can help to deepen and to precise our questions. And we also have strong questions about time. Time is really a difficult dimension because it has regular effects and irregular effects. Duration is not the same time with moment. Distance between.
When you say time, you talk about normal time, not age.
This is one of the questions: is the difference between time and age, because time is regular, age is regular in the measure. You are 50 years or 20 years, okay, but age is not regular for sociologists. People grow up very faster than others.
Yeah, but
so we have
demography. This is something which is already integrated into that.
Yes,
maybe you don't have demographers in the group.
No, but we already have problems inside sociology with this question. Because, for example, to start a survey, do we start the survey with when people have the same age, for example, 20? Or do we start the survey at a social age, for example, when they leave school? Because social inequalities are very effective on this difference in aging. So sociologists add difficulties compared to demographers. So, well. And time has then different dimensions and different kinds of effects, but some effects of life events on networks are also linked to qualities of the network itself. I mean, the effect of marriage or living abroad on the network is also linked to the quality of the ties in the network, to its structure, because this will contribute to resist to the effect of the life event or to increase it and so on. So we have to both consider life event and network, or not only causality relationships from the ones to the others. Then, from all these persons who constituted these residents, we have some stories of our survey. The first one began here with Claude Fischer, who is here, in California in 1977. And then it was the quite same survey was replicated by Michel Grossetti, who is here, and his team in Toulouse. And then Claude decided to make a new version of his survey with, this time, a longitudinal survey, a longitudinal dimension. Sorry. What I call longitudinal is when the same people are interviewed at different moments, which means there is a real time between the collection of data instead of a reconstituted history. And these are in red. And during this time, different surveys in different countries have been built independently. Well, independently, not exactly, because all of us have read books by Claude. This was my first sociological book, really, about network. And, well, this is mine, in Catalonia, with José Luis, here. In Switzerland, two different surveys by Eric, here. And then the Toulouse team decided to replicate his survey to see what was the difference, historical difference, with a lot of things that happened in between 2001 and 2017, including the apparition of devices like Facebook, Twitter, and so on. Does it change anything to the personal network? Was the question. new question of this survey. And this survey has also been replicated in Chongqing in China, and Jin Huang, who made it, could not be here, but we talked with her by Skype at several moments, so she's included in the residents, in fact, and now it's being replicated also in Guinea. But I think that are not available yet. Two other surveys among young people and older people were made in Toulouse. Then, after the first week, that was the work among social sciences, first week of this residence, we draw this table. We won't discuss about any precise point, but it was a kind of sharing and summarizing our knowledge about some main events. I have two tables with tables about health, well-being, about love and partnering and so on, and family. And for each one, what do we know about the effects of size of the network, composition, more or less heterogeneous, more or less share of kin or non-kin in it, its turnover, density, average, etc., and trying to decide where, which kind of personal process with ego does it involve? Identity change, context change, status change, resources change with plus or less, or minus, and so on. So this was a kind of a standpoint in our work to make this table, and then in the coming months we are going to precise it, to give data, and to better improve and augment this table. Then was the second week, and computer science and physics scholars came, and here are their surveys. They computed and explained us, from which we opened new questions, but also new ways of representing our data, new ways of computing it, of course, but also to just see how are our data disposed, and how can they be presented. So this ebook, this Facebook survey with Christophe and Raphael here, and also Camille, who had to leave yesterday, who shared the work with us. The difference, longitudinal survey, I explained you, we see the people at different intervals, like, and we make kinds of snapshot. Time is going between the interval, but we just interviewed them once and construct their network at this moment. The difference with these surveys is that they have quite a continuous time, and they can make very sharper sequences. It is quite like a film, while surveys are like maybe more snapshots. So this is there are more research about interactions, physical interactions, with a survey by Alain with the no, sorry. Alain, who is here, who studied the interactions between baboons, and Mathieu here. Mathieu studied face-to-face interactions with small device in a conference, and here also Alain with pupils in a school, and this one is collection of every action at every moment during some years, yes, 8 years on the Facebook networks. So, Claude, can you present what was done for California survey?
First of all, thank you very much for making this opportunity available. I've had a great intellectual time here at IMéRA discussing networks with colleagues of various kinds. What I will do here is to just discuss briefly and give you a taste of the kinds of survey work my team and I have done and a taste of the kind of findings that we look at. So the most recent study involved 1,000 adults surveyed 3 times over 5 years, about a year and a half between each survey in the San Francisco Bay Area. We had a group of people in their 20s and a group of people in the middle age. It says 50 to 60 on the slide. My mistake, it's really 50 to 70. What we do with these people is we interview them and ask them a set of questions designed to have them tell us the names of people who are important in their lives. And we ask many different questions. One example, we would ask people to tell us who they discuss their personal problems with. Another example is, who do you ask for advice if you're making an important decision? And as a result of this, people give us a list of questions, and it varies tremendously, from 1 or 2 names to 24 names, 30 names. And we find out a lot about what each of those persons is, a relative, a neighbor, and the kinds of relationship that ego, the survey respondent, has with each of those people. And then we construct a sort of understanding of the social character, the character of the social network that each person lives in. And we repeated this 2 times, about a year apart, to see how these things change. So that's the general survey idea, and what I will just illustrate here is how we can attack different kinds of what we consider as sociologists interesting questions. So one question one can ask is, how does getting a live-in partner, either marrying with someone or having a romantic partner live with you, sharing a household, how does getting such a partner or losing such a partner affect the number of friends that people draw on as confidants or advisors? How does it affect the other relationships people have in their networks, to be partnered or to be unpartnered? And we are able in this survey study, because we have data over time, to look at changes. So this graph I will walk you through briefly. It tells us, it asks, the outcome here is how many friends who are not relatives do you talk to about personal problems? How many? And this is the average for different kinds of groups. And one group is a group of people who had no partner the first time and no partner the second time. The next group is for people who had a partner the first time but then broke up and had no partner the second time. The third group are people who had partners both times. The fourth group are people who had no partner the first time but then had a partner the second time we interviewed them, the second or the third. This joins the 2 periods. There's a group that actually changed partners, not a very large group. The dark lines are the results we have for the younger people in our sample, the people in their 20s, and the lighter bars are for the people in their 50s to 70. The simple story here is that when people have partners, live-in partners, they have fewer non-relatives that they turn to for personal advice and for confidants, conversations that involve personal issues. And you see this in 2 different ways. You see it cross-sectionally. The no-partner people have this, who are no partners both times, average about 2 of those contacts. The people who are partnered both times average about 1.7 or so of those contacts. But you also see that in terms of change. People who go from having a partner to no partner end up reporting more, notably more, non-relatives that they turn to. While people who go the other way, they had no partner to start with, report, and then they have a partner, report relatively few at the second period. It is a very simple result, which after the fact one might consider clear and obvious, but in fact is an interesting dynamic, that the forming of a romantic tie, a serious romantic tie, tends to affect whether people turn to others who are not, to friends basically, for personal emotional advice and support. So that is the simple result. And then I'm going to be happy to answer any questions later about this particular study, these results, any other results we have. But I want to talk about just one other thing before I give the podium back to others, which is what are the implications of this collaboration between sociologists such as myself, social scientists such as myself, and the data scientists. So we have in our survey, we have details about people's closest ties. And for example, you can have 5 people that you've described to us. 3 might be friends, 2 in red might be relatives. And they can be connected in all sorts of different ways. In this person's life, let's say this is mother and father, and these are friends, there's no connection between the family part of their life and the friendship part of their life. In contrast, here, the relatives are connected to most of the friends. Here we have somebody who has many relatives that they depend on, and one friend out here who is disconnected from all the others. And here is another example, is someone who names one relative and 2 different sets of friends, which sort of implies a world in which they have 2 different social lives of separate kinds of friends. So we can find these in the sociological data, but I think some of the questions that can be posed for the data scientist is, what are all the combinatorial possibilities? How many possibilities are there? And then we compare them to the ones that actually appear in real life. Do these possibilities come in families or typologies? Is in some functional sense these 2 the same network, kind of network, for example? Does one type of structure tend to evolve into another type of structure? If you start with this kind of a structure, do you tend to move to this kind of structure, where you connect your relatives to your friends? And for us who are interested in the effect of life events, like partnering, which I just talked about, or getting sick, or retiring from your job, or moving from one community to another, how does a life event shock disrupt these different structures? Is there some pattern of the way in which these are disrupted? One might imagine, for example, that over time the ties to the relatives would be kept, but the ties to the friends might be lost, perhaps. But maybe it depends on whether the friends are connected to each other or strongly or not strongly. These are the kinds of questions that we hope data scientists can help us research by providing us with the tools that they have developed. And I'm done. Thank you. Yes?
Quick question. Empirically, is that all based on the ego's perspective?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
So there's no validity check on who knows who.
Right.
Do you think this person knows that person?
Right. That's right. And that is an important methodological issue, one of which we discussed. But this is as understood by the ego. If there is a secret connection between a couple of these people, that's not reported to us.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. The first question that I have, why did you choose 400 people?
I'm sorry, why did you choose?
Why did you choose 400 people from the age of 21 to 30 and 600 people from the age of 50 to the age of 70?
The reason we picked these 2 cohorts, and we originally wanted to have about the same number in each, but it was very hard to get young people into our sample. This research was funded by the National Institute of Aging in the United States, and we argued that if we took these 2 age groups, we would see the effect of different kinds of life events, and we'd have a large sample in each one. So the young people are going through things like graduation, first job, romantic partnering. Some of them will having the first child, moving a lot. The older people are going through things like health problems, retirement, death of friends and family, and so forth. And so we can study different kinds of life events, having large numbers of respondents in each case.
Did they continue to answer? Because from 2015 until 2017, do you have a attrition problem?
You know, it's a very good, we don't, not much of an attrition problem. The 88% of the people we talked to in wave 1 talked to us in wave 2. And 83% of the people we talked to in wave 1 talked to us in wave 1, 2, and 3. So it's not, as surveys go, it's not a major attrition problem. Okay, thank you. Yes?
Are we compensated?
Yes, they are paid. I will say that doing this network research, having people talk about their social ties and list names is hard work. It's not like answering an opinion question. Do you like the president or not? And so it's taxing. And so we pay them $25 for the first interview, $35 for the second, and $50 if they did all of them.
The last question, a general question. All the surveys, they give the same questions to everybody. They share the same, it's the same surveys, or it's different questions? For instance, in California,
Well,
The people in Toulouse, the research team around Michel Grossetti have largely used the same questions we've used in California. There are some additions and subtractions, but centrally it's the same kind of questions.
all the surveys that were in the higher part of the slide have quite the same. It was one of the reasons why these people were invited there, because another kind of issue is the comparison between countries and between periods too. But this is for the work. So the Toulouse survey is...
But the Toulouse, we have several surveys, but using the same methodology basically that Claude presented. So when we started this survey, the aim was to compare with the Californian study, and we were surprised in 2001 to find that there are strong convergence in the results with sample in Toulouse 2001 and a sample in California in 1977. I was very surprised, but there were also some differences. For example, in the Toulouse survey, we have less very small networks and isolated persons, for example, and some other differences. But this experience and other comparison about personal networks convinced me that it is a good way to make international comparisons, because institutions can be very different, the social context can be very different, but everybody has a mother and a father and child, and so the personal networks can change, because what you consider as a friend is not the same in different countries, but basically the structure of the network, the characteristic doesn't change so much, so the differences can be interpreted with and giving a lot of results. So I don't comment.
Okay. So Eric,
Is there something? Can you say something? What are the interesting commonalities you found between, say, the California sample and the Toulouse sample? What really stood out as being in common, for example?
Common, for example, in all, and not only that kind of survey, but all the personal network survey showed homophily effect. The fact that you are friends with people sharing some characteristic with you, like education, for example, age, etc. So the correlation are quite the same. They're very, very similar, for example. And some other feature, like the density of the network measured in the same way, is almost the same.
Okay, so we started with colleagues in 1998 to collect a huge data set of couples living in Switzerland. Was about 1,500 couples with both partners interviewed. The interviewees were between age 18 to age 70, and the idea at the time was to try to see whether some kind of partnership functioning would present higher risk of developing bad conjugal quality, dissatisfaction, maybe divorce on the short term. And then I decided to go on with the survey and to organize further waves in 2004, only for female partners due to budgetary issues, and then in 2011 and 2017. So this is a huge longitudinal survey where we try to trace not only the couples who stay together, but also the couples who divorced, or the individuals who divorced, then have a new couple, or the individual who became widow. The sampling is a random stratified sampling drawn by the Statistical Office of Switzerland, with the oversampling of the French and Italian region compared with the German-speaking region. The collection mode were first phone interviews, but for the network part that I'm going to focus on, they were actually web-based interviewed. One main issue that raised from our work together here, especially during the first week, was the importance of what we may call unexpected life events. Sometimes we call it non-normative events in sociology because they don't follow the right path of life as forecasted by the social norms. Unemployment, health problems, problems with the law, problems, forced migrations. What do we have? Any kind of divorce, any kind of events that do not belong to the normal way of lives. Why are we interested in those events? Well, because we think that they are major sources of vulnerability. Why do we connect those events with personal networks? Because we also expected that the changes that they create in personal networks is an additional factors of vulnerability for people who go through them. For instance, typically, a person who divorces may lose a large chunk of its networks, which makes the adaptation to the life event even more difficult. So that's why we tried to understand the accumulation of events rather than focusing on the exact event when they happen. We tried to make a distinction between what we called chronicle events, that is, events that keep on occurring in the life course, versus acute events, that is, a single shot event that happen only one time in the life course. Past non-normative events, that is, event that happened once in the life course but never happened again, and eventually people who have never experienced such unexpected events. And you have here, I'm sorry for the gray lines, but you have here frequency tables about unemployment events during the 20 years of the Swiss longitudinal panel, for first females and then males. And you can see, for instance, that about 7% of males of this sample have experienced a chronic professional event, meaning that they have experienced unemployment in first wave, in third waves, and in fourth waves. Whereas the acute professional events are those who experienced the events only in wave 4. The past professional event concerned people who experienced the unemployment in the past, and eventually those about 82% of females never experienced unemployment problems in these samples. The number are about the same for males. That we could do only with longitudinal data, I think, and that's the strength of the survey. Now, we wanted to see whether these kind of events had any effects on two critical dimensions of personal networks, meaning the number of good friends that one has in the networks and their availability to support the individuals in case of need. And you have the distribution of those two variables for females. For instance, 3% of females cite no friends, 4% cite only one friend, and about 30% cite 7 friends or more in their personal networks. About 47% of them say that the network can provide an important help in case of need. 38% like secondary help, and about 15% no help at all. So the idea was to try to see whether the kind of non-professional, non-normative professional event, unemployment events, had any effect on the friends and on the support. What we could see is those very simple regression models, and that has to be further worked, of course. This is a first shot, is that for men, there is a strong effect of acute problems and chronic problems on the number of friends they cite. It really makes a difference to have either a chronic unemployment problem or an acute problem for the number of friends. It has, however, no effect whatsoever on the available support for men. For females, the situation is very different, and I think it's interesting. The acute problems doesn't have any effect on the number of friends they cited. So it's like the network is not sensitive to critical problems that happen like within the 2 previous years. However, when the problems become chronic, then they are highly impacted by the problems. You could see here there is a very strong significant effects of chronic problems for women. So we could see that the impact of unemployment, non-normative events is different for males and females in terms of the number of friends. More interestingly even, the support provided by the network is also differently impacted for females and males. The acute problems, unemployment problems, doesn't have any effect on the available support of women. So if the problems remain circumscribed in time, it seems at first sight that there is no impact on the support available. But when the problems become chronic, then there is a huge effect on the available support for women, which do not appear for men. That's the kind of results. That's the kind of results that seems interesting and that we need to further develop. How do we explain it? Well, there are a lot of different hypotheses that we can stress, but one would be that for men, one major sources of support is a wife, which is insensitive or which is kind of more permanent. For females, the main support is not necessarily the husband in terms of domestic support, even emotional support. They have other sources of support, and when they have a chronicle story of unemployment, and probably health is the same, then they don't have the security of having the partners around.
So this one is very, seems at least, is very much gender separated. So how do you compare this with, LGBTQ communities and other people? Because here is like one, we know that it's not like that.
Right. The problem was when we started this in 1998, we had only 2 homosexual couples within the 1,500 couples. So it was very hard to develop a statistical analysis of those. And we will have to have specific items to go deeper into this gender issue. Well, I think it's still something to show that there are differences between heterosexual men and heterosexual women. It's the first step.
But, I mean, you focused on the relationship between men and women in the household, but, I mean, what about just the network size? I'm assuming women on average have more outside friends than men do in general. Is that not the case?
No,
Right.
we haven't found that yet. Okay. Thank you.
Then José Luis.
Yeah, this is okay. So, thanks also to IMéRA for this opportunity. In this case, we have data about migrants. It's not about the general population, but migrants both in USA and Spain, right? And the original question was if we could develop a measure, a personal network measure or social network measure in order to understand better the processes of change, acculturation, or adaptation to the destination countries, right? This is basically the idea. So, and okay, we have many we did a survey with different, it's a quota sample in the sense we have 500 cases to do, and we selected the ethnic groups we thought were more interested, both USA and Spain, with the Dominicans in between. So we had Dominicans in Spain and Dominicans in USA in order to compare, the different communities, right? With a lot of information at the ego level, and also a acculturation questionnaire, a standard one, depression questionnaire, etc. Okay, for the Spanish case, so we have 500 personal networks with 45 alters for each ego, so it's a lot of alters. So we were able to have a lot of information about many other people and the structure among them. For the Spanish case, we have about 300 and several, and for a subset of those, we have some about 100 of longitudinal data. So from some cases, small ones, in some cases, we have 2 waves. New ones, this is a doctoral thesis. We have also a follow-up, and in this case, we have even three waves of data. So, and this kind of information is really very illustrative because it's very qualitative. We just not have, you have the questionnaire, but also in-depth interviews, and we can understand what are, the mechanisms of change at the qualitative level at least, right? So just for giving you an idea, this is a plot of the 500 personal networks of the first wave, 500. So every small picture here is it's a very complex world. It's a person, but we go with 45 alters. And basically the idea is that in this part, we have all the personal networks that have most of the active contacts in the origin country. Okay, so they have mostly of the relatives or people in the origin country. Here, we have most of those people have the most of their contacts, active contacts, compatriots in the destination country, right? And here, some of them, they have many nationals, many French people in the network, right? So We are interested in this collaboration. Probably the computation is going on in this moment. I don't know which probably is going on. What are the microstructures, like in the case of Claude, what are the microstructures that can help us to understand, for instance, looking at the years of residence, what are the microstructures that can understand what is the path to this, direction? Of course, people having a more balanced network with the same proportions of nationals, compatriots, etc. They are just a few. So basically, you can see migrants along years with different countries. They have basically this transnational pattern of connection, right? So this is something we are interested in understand. Having census of these microstructures, you will learn a bit later. What combinations account for what kind of adaptation, right, at the personal level, right? I think that is great.
Well, I won't explain a lot about this survey, just to help you understand that while the population was not such a huge population, but it was a more qualitative survey with long interviews and a longitudinal study. So we come to see the same people at different moments, every 3 years, and seeing who are the parts of the network who remain from a wave to another. And we also have information about monthly calendar in the interval of 3 years, and with specific events that can occur at a period or another, their opinion about these important events and so on. And then we can build their network, including the relationships between their alters, and see how network evolves and how can we relate it to the events and to what people say about these events and about this transformation. So we have not a lot of persons, but we have a lot of explanations of why this alter is no more cited. Did people have a conflict, or did the person move far away, or anything? And it's very useful for sociologists also to understand why ties disappear, why people can leave some persons away from their life, and which ones and why, and so on. So with this kind of data, I can make rough statistics, because all in between we have 306 networks, but in the basis of each alter which is cited, we have 11,000 relations all included, but some statistics can be made, but concerning the life events, on the basis of ego, it's quite rough because it's not so important. So I always switch between statistical trends and what is the story of the people as we can read it in the graph. For example, here it's before partnering. We see some small communities, small components of the network that are not very connected. The coming of a partner who here in pink can contribute to connect people from his own family in yellow, from the partner's family in green, and all kinds of friends, colleagues, and so on, that in blue. And conversely, the breakup of the relationship makes, again, the network lose this centrality and dispersing. But what is more difficult to see, except by seeing all the first names of all the persons in these components, and to see what happened to these persons, it's difficult to see how the communities, the groups in the network evolve in time. So yesterday, with Camille, we tried first to have the evolution of the structure of the network in time with some kind of variable. Here is density and centralization betweenness of the network. And we have the story of a person, of an ego, in wave 1 here, and then in wave 2 density increases and it decreases again. So we can make a kind of classification of these trajectories of networks across these variables, and to see what do these cases have in common and don't. For example, is there an event here that made density increase? This one is more regular. What is the difference according to the life? So this kind of representation was new for us. And, well, now we decided to continue this way and to try to develop a classification of our network on this topic.
When you say it's new, you mean technically the kind of graphics?
It's new for sociologists. We didn't know.
Follow the centrality and the thing over time?
Yes, of course. We have, but we did not represent it this way. Okay. So it's cross-fertilization with the discussions we had this week with data scientists and physicists and sociologists. I think it is the core aim of IMéRA. So that's what we did.
I'm just asking that whether you have...
We have the data.
A theoretical framework for this, but some thought about what could be the evolution of centrality.
The theoretical framework we have, the measures and the indicators we know, and we have the same ones. But they have routines of seeing and considering the data that we have not. So for us, it opens new ideas. No, not only new, we didn't apply directly the tools to our materials, but it opened new ideas for computing our data.
And to check more closely the hypothesis you have.
Yeah. And here, for example, Raphael made me this nice representation of the community evolution in the network, so it can help me first detect some transformations in community. For example, why these two communities in the network divide. And then, for example, here it seems that there is more movement between communities, and it can give me an alert of what happened during these waves. Do you want to add something more, Raphael?
Yes, maybe just besides that every vertical line is a wave.
A wave, yes. Yes, a survey wave. So theme 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And I have to precise that yesterday Raphael showed this diagram to Claire, and Claire managed to guess who
You're right. Yeah. From this, I guessed whose respondent it was before he told me. And then when I guessed it, I can go back to the story of this respondent, whose name is Gaël. And here we have the life of Gaël with who is his partner. He had 2 children. He works in such, well, I don't remember, a school, and so here is where he lives and with whom, his work, his studies, and so on. And effectively, I detect a lot of, well, he is always with the same partner, and his conjugal life is, well, he had events, but he stayed with the same one. I won't say more. And for example, between those 2 last waves for which we detected a movement, we can see that strong components are less numerous and more divided in some smaller components. So I go back to my data and see that what happened to him. And in fact, I can say that he moved from Caen to the island of La Réunion, and also he was declared a very important chronic disease. And his network has changed for a part with these two events. And then I go back to the interview and says what he says, for example, about he considers some friends betrayed him after this disease and so on. And I can have the story of any alter and also of his way of managing his network in the case of these events. So now, yeah. It's exactly the same procedure with the name generator based upon context, with the 53 context that are always discussed in the same order, same way, and so on. So, of course, it is not their, well, it is their network because they answer the question, and we can compare from a wave to another because in 3 years they have forgotten what they said before. And then we construct a new network. Then we go back to the office, we take the former survey, and we identify people who were there, no more cited, and new one, and so on. And then we go back with the person 3 days after and say, well, now let's talk about people who disappeared, and what do you think about this evolution, and what, lots of questions about their life and their network.
Probably this one is a little bit far off, but in principle, this is if you look at this from a higher perspective, this is a long-range correlation problem, because each alter of an ego is itself an ego.
Sure.
So, have you thought about, some ways of taking into account the fact that you have actually a much more connected network with very different structures, and eventually, possibly, phase transitions or things that are more statistical mechanics oriented?
So we have an indication of what happened in the lab of alter, where we ask questions, for example, why does not ego see anymore this alter? Sometimes ego tells us the story of alter, where he moved, he divorced, and so on. But you're right, and there is another perspective on social networks that is considering a population and saying it's more generally the case in physics, considering all the interactions between these people. Sociology does it also, for example, for organization and so on. But for our biographical perspective, it's better to have these ego networks. And of course, what happens to alter, we don't know it really, and we don't know to which other networks they participate and so on. But an interesting and very interesting in between is made by the surveys by Eric, in which the both partners are interviewed. This way, you have the network of one of them, the network of the other of them, and each one cites a part, but not all, the network. And it's a very, very nice way to consider in between what you are mentioning.
But then I have another question. Why not Facebook at this point?
In the last wave, we added a lot of questions about surveys, about Facebook, but before it didn't exist.
So now with Facebook, it's not. Now it's not a reconstruction of reality; it's the reality itself.
Well, I mean, yeah.
No, it's a joke.
Speaking,
It's a joke. It's a joke. Well, actually, I don't understand this expression, a reconstruction of reality.
Psychology with you say this way. I mean, your memory, you relive the event of your life in your memory. So you have to recast relive it.
Yeah. But I don't see a situation where you don't have just a reconstruction of reality.
On Facebook, you can collect data in real time.
Yeah, it's that's you collecting. That's what I call reconstruct something. No. Okay, so now we agree. So we have this survey. So this data set is a bit different with the previous ones, but well, you know, there is always this thing with surveys like those that were presented before, and those that we can do with these huge methods on big data, is that in general we say that we have either small data sets with many information about the respondents, about the egos, or large data sets with quite few information about the egos. So what we did here is doing a survey on the uses of Facebook by using a Facebook application. So the small picture up there explains the principle. So people that agreed to participate in the survey, they would install the AlgoPol application, and the AlgoPol application then Facebook asks the user if they agree, if they give the authorization to the application, and then when they say yeah with their Facebook password, okay, the light is supposed to be green, and then when they say yeah, it's okay, then Facebook sends us all their data, yeah, which means all their data, all that they have posted on Facebook, whatever it means on the respondent's life. At least it's something that they do in their life, posting things on Facebook. So everything what they have posted on Facebook from the beginning of their account, also with all the comments that they got from their friends, and also the network. So we have the network, and we have information in continuous time about the comments. So we had 15,000 people did that, because we managed to do a nice application that would give them a picture of the network. They could explore it, and so there was a nice interface so they can play with it. So they wanted to do it, and also they wanted to help science. So we got that. And now this residence was the occasion to compare this type of reconstruction of reality with other types of reconstruction of reality, reality about networks, and compare what question we can share with about the where is it? Yeah, about the life events. So some ideas that could thought of on this data was finding groups of connected friends that interact with ego at some point in time, and at another point in time they don't interact with ego. So if there are, of course, if there is one friend that puts a lot of comments and likes on the ego's posts, and then 2 years later they don't do it anymore. It's not necessarily means that this friend is not. It not necessarily means that they are not friends anymore. Maybe just the friend doesn't use Facebook anymore. So that's the problem here with this data. But when it's a group of connected friends, then it begins to mean something. Yes?
I just have a quick question. So the ego gives you permission to use their data because they're entering into a survey. But does the ego give you permission to use the friend's data that's posting on the ego's profile?
Well, that's a very interesting question. So there was, we had a discussion with CNIL, so the French on privacy issues. So they said, okay, there is that problem with this permission. So you have to do some. Well, of course, the data is completely anonymized, and but yes, we could get the author's comments, so the friend's comments. There was this thing that is a bit treachery, but we had to tell ego, to tell the respondent that they have to inform their friends of the fact that they do this survey. So we gave them the choice: either you post something. So the application would post something on their profile, say, "Hey, I'm participating, blah blah," and so I will collect. Also the comments that you have posted on my account. Or you can, there were two possibilities, and the third was, I will tell them in another way.
Okay.
So.
With another method. I have one more question. Did you say it's from 2013 to 2017?
15. Because at 2015, Facebook changed the API so that we can't anymore get the network.
Only
So.
But does this also correspond to like lots of people stop using Facebook? Like, did you account for the fact that lots of people left Facebook?
Not so many. No, but maybe. But anyway, yeah. But in 2000, no, it was now. It was now it's impossible. You can't get the network from 2015. You could not. That was over. You could not get the network. Only Facebook can. And also from last year on GDPR. Now you don't, exactly for this reason you can't anymore get even the information that some author has commented. You just can have the gross number of likes, but you don't know who liked the things, and the comments. You don't have the comments. You have the number of comments. So we were lucky to do that at the right time. And so we have these discussions this week we had with our colleagues on these live events. There was these possibilities of looking for groups of connected friends that interact at some time and then they stop interacting, or the other way around, or imagine several new friends that come at a given time, so that may happen. That there was a particular. These are some ideas to find for some ego a moment in time when something important happened, like moving a city or yeah.
It might sound stupid, but comparing to the other surveys, you measure the answer of the person every year. Here in the Facebook, it's on daily basis, on the hourly basis, on the second basis. How do you measure the network through time? I mean, you make it as a yearly level, you make it as a time, minute level, as a second?
If you want to compare something with the panel of Claire, we can say, okay, we will take the same, okay, we will say 2 years and we will see. But actually we don't, what we don't have to the second, even not to the year, is when the links between the authors appear. It's just when we take the data, it's just one point in time, we take the data, and at that moment, author 1 and author 2 are friends on Facebook. We don't even know what it means that they are friends on Facebook, by the way.
No, because you said that you have all the comments through time. So
Yeah,
it
that's...
means that you can have, I mean, today, yesterday, and the day after, and so on. So which is, in a sense, we can measure which friends they enter at time, what's the status of the person changes it every day, and that's
Yeah, so we can do, you can put them in bins of 1 month or 2 months or 6 months, and we can see the resolutions of and see how it evolves. So there, of course we can check if there is a change in relation, like we can see that at some point there is a post that, not a post, there is an information in the data that says Ego has changed their profile information, and the change may be they are single and suddenly they are in a relationship. So okay, let's go there and see what happens on the network with a year before and a year after.
No, my question was, for instance, one person can change his status of relationship 5 times per year. So that, if you want to aggregate at the year level at the end, you need to have a precise measure at which time the person continues to be in the relationship or not. Or if you take into account...
that's we have to find clues to find a good...
Maybe I can contribute to one on this question, because this was an issue for us, your question. Is time continuous or is time with conscience? In our social surveys, the time of each wave of survey is completely arbitrary. Whether they can say what are the interesting moments. When there is a lot of events in a short time, just by the measure of density of events in the time period they want, they focus more or less with a more or less interval, but they can't see which are the interesting periods. Why we just decide to, well, I put them again, and it's difficult for us to retrace. Of course, we make, as I showed in my slide, you make an account with your calendar of what happened in their story month by month, the 3 previous years, but you don't give dates to the relationships. What they can date them with interactions. That's a big difference.
The problem, of course, is that we have a very partial view of the respondents' lives, but we have 15,000 of them. So if we pick some that don't, okay, we don't have enough information, okay, never mind, we will pick someone else and we will eventually find something.
And the last question, just for curiosity, so you send an email to 15,000 people, or you just make an announcement on Facebook and...
No, we had the chance to have an article published in Le Monde, which is a prominent newspaper, a French newspaper. So that was the first nice thing. And there was this thing of when you installed the application, you could see the picture of your network, and there was a button, share this visualization. So you share it, and oh, look at my network, it's fantastic. So it was a word of mouth thing. And also we had a Paul Institute that sent the application to a panel representative French Facebook users, and finally we got 800 people that are more or less representative. So because we had of course an overrepresentation of young people young people urban and with an interest in fancy visualization networks things. So of course that was a problem. So we could have more diverse respondents. And now, so this is for this data set, and also for the now I present just the method that was the heart of Raphael's thesis. Raphael's PhD thesis was a way to analyze all these ego networks. It's with small structures. These are all the possible combinations of 5 nodes. 5 connected nodes. How 5 nodes can be connected? That they can make a path. They can make a star with just someone in the middle. They can make a click while everyone is connected. They can make, okay, all these possibilities, and so we count inside one ego network. We count how many times each of these patterns occur. And then we can, for the whole data set, and then we can compare, for instance, we can compare our data set on Facebook ego networks and Claire's data set on the ego networks. They are, of course, they are very diverse, very different. They have completely different sizes, but still we can compare them and see that, for instance, in Claire's dataset, we have much more of this. Of course, we don't see a lot, but we have much more of these, and and on our dataset, we have much more of which is this one, and here it's, we can compare this way the whole dataset, and once you focus on one dataset, you can compare 2 ego networks to the average, the mean values, the mean proportion of this specific dataset. So we have, for instance, two examples here. Here it's a network with many stars, like the star is the one node and that connects 4 nodes that are not connected to each other. And of course you can see with this network, you can understand why these patterns counts a lot, because there is one central person that is likely to be ego's partner, and we can have we could find a cluster of networks, of many networks of our data set that are of this that have this precise this type of structure, and other type of structure where there is a very highly connected group of friends, and we can find it this way with all these small patterns. And so this method is really easy to reproduce on other data sets, so that's what we will try with several of these that we have talked earlier. And also just a last word on these the other data set here. It's small networks of size 5, and actually Claude's data, and also Michel's, they have the question is, when we see these patterns, we can say, oh yeah, there is someone that make the connection between others. We can have the intuition of some social roles of these small structures, but it's just an exercise of intellectual exercise of imagining what can happen. Now with this data with of the Californian networks or the networks from Toulouse, we have small networks of size 5 or 4, small networks of important authors. So we can go to this. If we have one pattern that we guess what can happen in this situation, then we can go and see many situations where many respondents that have given precise information about who is whom, and so we can investigate more on the social interpretations of these small structures. Oui, j'ai dit ça. Ah non, oui, d'accord, il était plusieurs fois, j'ai compris. Oui. Yeah.
Can you go back to this graphic here?
Mm.
So, here what I see is some sort of emergence behavior that you see from the network that is associated with something that is specific. So, how hard will it be? I mean, it shouldn't be very hard because you just said that you can build in a way in a kind of a neural network model where you build a computational simulation of a society based on rules that you extract out of the behavior of these networks. So it's kind of an artificial society, an artificial intelligence society where the events are controlled by the statistical distribution of this particular structure.
You're suggesting, for instance, making a generative model
of a social network.
Yeah, actually, that might be a nice transition to Camille's work if you were here today. She left yesterday. That's
a computational exercise.
That's the kind of thing he did, and not based on the graphlets, but on an algebra of building blocks of nodes.
Not only that, but you can also look at this as from the other side. So it's very hard to have data sets of real people that answer to all your questions. But if you can simulate networks under different conditions, then you can generate enormous number of data that you can then reuse for
actually the generation of realistic ego networks is really an open problem and still haven't been properly addressed. Well, there is still no solution. So yeah, I agree. It might be a good way to try something.
In a way, I think it might even have applications in other fields, like automated machines that have to cooperate in an industry in some sort of fabric in which they have to do something, but then they interact with each other and build this kind of networks. So these are all things that come to mind.
Yeah. Actually, this graphlet thing comes from, well, biologists use it a lot on biological network. I guess, well, I'm not sure they have tried to generate random networks with that, but it's a nice idea, the idea of making machines or devices that collaborate
but it's
takes
another
us quite
story.
it takes us quite long. Far from.
So I gathered here two kinds of survey, and Alain can comment, of course, because Mathieu could not be there this morning. So I just take a word about his survey. That is, you were talking about reality. That this survey, social patterns, is about measuring real face-to-face interactions by automatical device people wear on their skirt and that collects data about these interactions. What is very interesting in this kind of work is that it can help us understand how, in a crowd, people start to face each other, to communicate, and it is the very beginning of relationships. And also, his work has the advantage of coupling this measure with a survey, asking people whether they know each other, what did they do together, how long, and so on. And so it's a work in process, and he's trying now to see how to find signals between this interaction data and survey data about what are the common points between these people. For example, are they in the same academic discipline? Are they the same age? In which kind of hierarchical position are they together, and so on. And this kind of survey invite us, as sociologists, to consider more the frequency of interaction of our populations, because we have this data, but we did not choose, in my case, we did not choose it yet a lot. So because we can see that some events has an effect, maybe not only on the network in terms of size, composition, and so on, but sometimes it seems having no effect on the network structure, but it has on the frequency of meetings. So this has to be investigated and analyzed a little bit more. And also there are the surveys by Alain, with, well, he has several surveys, but we talked more about his last one, not last one, but one of the survey he has with the interactions between baboons, and also in the precise population of baboons. How do relationships between them evolve in time? And he aggregates time and seeing what is the stable part of the network. And if you can isolate the stable part of the network, you can see the precise evolution in the structure of these remaining ties. This is the project we have now. And this allows to see whether in a time set there are moments of more intense change than in other, in terms of the structure of this sub-network that is stable. Do you want to add something, Alain?
No, just to comment the figure. So basically, we have a monthly network of interactions between baboons, basically proximity. And so basically, here the yellow parts means that it's periods in which the network is very stable. And then suddenly, between two yellow blocks, you have much lower values of the similarity between the networks, which show, therefore, automatically that there is something happening. And then you can go back and ask the people at the facility, and they tell you, yes, indeed, at that month there was this thing happening, and then you can trace back what exactly happened in the network.
And all these kind of exchanges with us gave us the idea that we can also consider our first question: what are effects of life events on network? Maybe to see the reversal way. If we see high density of events in the network, what does it tell us about maybe some life events we had not suspected, because we have our idea of what life events may be, but maybe there are other life events or events that change the network and we had not anticipated. So, well, we have to open our considerations in terms of interactions between networks and on events in general. So we come to the, well, kind of conclusion that is a very provisory conclusion about the challenges we have faced during these 2 weeks, and a huge part of them, I suppose, will remain. But that's research, and that's the way it goes on. So, of course, we had methodological problem due to the heterogeneity of surveys, the choice of measures we have to make. What is the best measure, for example, of turnover, of heterogeneity of the network, and for every measure we have to discuss and find the best idea, and what can we share about also this measure from what we have in our surveys, because of course we are constrained by what we already have. And we had very crucial and questions about, for example, which is the population of reference for each event. For example, divorce, do we compare people who divorce to the whole population, or shall we compare divorced people with the people at risk? That means if you have no partner, you have no risk to divorce. So, there were lots of discussions that are not only methodological, but more, this divide between methodological problems and conceptual problems, in fact, is not a good divide. Also discussions about, shall we measure by wave, or we aggregate and see all waves and see where the events are. Also the issue of distinguishing the origin of the relationship between ego and alter, and not only the first citation of alter in the network. And also a lot of conceptual problems between regular and social time. We already mentioned it with Raouf, age, transitions, events, and so on. Discussions about when does the effect start? Is there a mattress effect, as Eric evoked it? Is there an elasticity of the network or an inertia? Does it resist to that change, or does it suffer the change and then comes back to the former shape? And this also gives us the idea of events being reversible and others not. And also, what does this effect vanish? To what point do we consider that it is the end of the effect, and how can we measure it? And also, as I said before, what is common and what is different in these events? Why do some events provoke effects in time of size, while others have effects in terms of composition or structures and so on? Is it an issue of events being negative or positive? Is it a matter of emotional charge, events involving other persons, and so on? Can we classify the events from their effects on network? Also, of course, a question that is far wider than our team, which is the issue of causality, or can we imagine an event is the causal origin of an evolution of the network, or shall we better talk in terms of interferences or co-occurrences of change with an event and so on? This is, of course, a general question. Another development is network a consequence or a cause, as some of us detected sometimes. There is a relational event at the origin of the change. And there are also cumulative effects, experiences that create skills, so the network is never the same after the event, and the way the network evolves cannot be the same. Well, we tried to put some good ideas as a short reminder of what we have experienced from these exchanges between disciplines. First, measure substructures, identify bricks of operators that can summarize what kind of changes we are expecting, how are they combined, and how are they combined with time into trees. And then the idea also to compare standard evolution, that is not stability, but evolution with age, as we are talking with people and time. So to compare the standard evolution with lags that can occur in the network evolution, and as Camille said, the difference between genotypes and phenotypes, and variations from this standard evolution. Idea also of, instead of nodes, represent lines for alters and for networks and so on, to see the trajectory of a variable for an alter or for a network. Also distinguish turnover from changes of structures in the stable part of the network, because it was an issue to understand the network changes in the structure when there is a big turnover. I mean, a lot of people leave the network. A lot of new alters come, so it's very difficult. Well, so we had the idea of comparing these two measures. And then we can talk of layers of ties that accumulate with time. This time is related to the period of life when people have met the first time. We can identify these layers, and it can help understanding what happens after. Changes in groups of connected friends, as was said, that can give a good indication for detecting event at a large scale. And in Facebook data, the idea also was to detect intensity of new posts that can identify a change, and then they have the possibility to see what kind of event is posted here. But also, of course, we finish with more questions than good ideas, but this is the research trend, and we are not different in this respect, even if we collect a good share of good persons and good ideas and good research. Question that is the one of regular and irregular evolutions. An issue that's raised was at different times, both by sociologists and by big data scientists. Is there an individual signature? We mean a person can reproduce the same shape of her network with different people. For example, a person who moves far away can rebuild a new network that has exactly the same profile with different people. So, is there an individual signature? Well, if there is, till when? Can some event break this individual signature and make a bifurcation towards a new signature. This has to be, we have no answer for the moment. And also, how can we compare structure with turnover is dominant? I told about it. And also, with this issue of graphlet and so on, do measures of substructure tell about structure? Raphael, in his thesis, told yes, but we have to check it now for other kinds of data sets and for what structure measure, is it true or less true? Then an issue also is that life events can come in packages. It's difficult to really isolate one. And what are these packages? What happens if they don't come as they should? Some of them are very regular, and we can identify typical evolutions and also atypical ones. For these atypical ones, we have to go further in the data to detect, for example, why some people, when partnering, do not place their partner at the center of the networks, for example. And maybe it is because they moved far away, or because they have to suffer an illness, or maybe because they had a child very rapidly and so on. So it's difficult to disentangle all these packages of events. Another issue, we are focusing on the network consequences of life event, but what about the life event consequences of network change? For example, when parents divorce, the death of spouse and disputes between friends, and it can have a reversal effect on life. And also can and how do networks buffer the effect of life events? For example, does retirement work differently work for ego depending on whether they are friends outside the work? Also, I didn't mention it yet, but the level of education, and we talked about gender with Eric, and there are a lot of variables that can change this kind of effect. And for example, also, do medical crises progress differently depending on family availability and so on? So in both directions are life events and network connected. And that's what another one of our challenges and difficulties. So this is not the only conclusion, but this is most a way of anticipating future work. We have ideas about it, but of course it will remain complicated. Raouf?
And I have to say a few words. Thank you very much. Just to mention a couple of things about IMéRA. We are finishing the restructuring of it took 4 years. So from next year, I think we will have the final version. Since we have different people from different places here, just to tell you first that the calls for residencies 2020-2021 will be published on June 14, so in 3 weeks approximately. And in these new calls, you will see that we will open IMéRA also to members of the university, of Aix-Marseille University, that there will be local residents. Of course, young residents in this case. That's for assistant professor to use the IMéRA as a strong instrument to foster interdisciplinary research in the university. I think it's a very important thing. And then you will have new figures like senior fellow and things like this. You will see this in a minute. I wanted to insist more on the. I don't want to take your time. On what we are seeking behind this IMéRA teams. So the idea, of course, is not to have these teams and then it's not a one-shot stuff. Ideally, what we would have, and I take also advantage of this because Franco is there and he's the head of the other team. I didn't have the chance to attend. So the idea is that this team get transformed into IMéRA research groups with something like 1 or 2 visits here, depending on what you have every year with a certain frequency. We will start actually with this new form on June 20. We'll have the first IMéRA group on climate change, land dynamics, and sustainable development, which will be actually supervised by 2 top researchers, one from Princeton, Andy Dobson, and the other from Chicago, Mercedes Pascual, both residents of IMéRA this year. So this guy, we will meet here from June 20 to June 26 with people from AMU, from Aix-Marseille, like Joël Guillaume, climate science, or Albert Bondo from ecology. You see, the idea is to have. So I would like Claire and her teammates to think about transforming, and also Franco, as another important topic here, to transform the team into a group. There will be just a difference in terms of logistics. We will not pay for traveling, but we pay for housing and accommodation. And then the duration will be not 2 or 3 weeks, but 3 days to 1 week. So that's, and then there will be something we can convention this, and that's. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think it is a good perspective to.
C'est pour ça que je suis intervenu à la fin.
It's perfect because work is going on and we have a lot of work to finish it, to produce outputs of this common resource. It was only the beginning.
Yeah, that's what.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Or maybe there are other questions, or with the lunch we can.